He has to go. 4 words. My own son said them into a phone he thought was private, and I was standing in the garage doorway holding a socket wrench, listening to my future get decided without me in the room. My name is Frank Sullivan. I'm 74 years old. For 41 years I ran a small auto shop outside Denver, fixing transmissions and brakes for anyone who walked through the door. I raised 1 son in the house on Willow Creek Lane. I buried my wife from that same house. I thought I'd die there too, peacefully, in my own bed. My son had other plans. My wife Margaret passed 2 years ago, on a February morning, in the bedroom we'd shared for 39 years. After the funeral, the house felt too big and too quiet for one old man. Some mornings I still made coffee for 2 out of habit, before I caught myself standing there with an extra cup in my hand. My son Kevin called every Sunday like clockwork. About 6 months after Margaret died, he showed up with his wife Denise and a suggestion that sounded, at the time, like the kindest thing anyone had offered me in years. "Dad, you shouldn't be rattling around this big house alone," he said, hands in his pockets, standing in my kitchen. Denise and I were talking. "Why don't we move in? Help you out, keep you company, save on rent while we save up for our own place." I said yes before he finished the sentence. Within 3 weeks they'd packed up their apartment and moved into the 2 spare bedrooms upstairs, the ones Margaret and I had once hoped to fill with grandchildren. For a while, it really did feel like a blessing. Denise cooked most nights. Kevin fixed the gutters without being asked. We watched football on Sundays the way we used to when he was a boy. I told my neighbor Harold I was the luckiest old man in Colorado, having my own son look after me. I had no idea the man smiling across my dinner table was already counting the days until the house belonged to somebody else, and that somebody wasn't going to be me. By the 6th month, small things started shifting. Denise began calling the house ours on the phone with her sister. She replaced Margaret's curtains without asking, said the old ones let in too much dust. Kevin started asking about my pension, my savings, whether the house was paid off. It was, free and clear since 2009. I told myself a son should know these things. One night at dinner, Kevin mentioned a college friend who just inherited his mother's house in Aurora and sold it for close to $900,000. "Prices out here are just crazy right now," he said, looking around my kitchen in a way that made the back of my neck go cold, though I couldn't have told you why. Not yet. Then came the doctor's visits. Kevin started insisting on driving me, even though I'd driven myself for 50 years without a single accident. He'd sit in the exam room asking my doctor pointed questions about memory and cognitive decline, questions I hadn't asked and didn't need answered. Denise started leaving pamphlets on the counter. Soft lighting, smiling gray-haired actors, names like Golden Meadows and Peaceful Pines. "Oh, those are just for research," she said, sweet as anything, "in case we ever need them down the road." Down the road. I didn't argue. I didn't want to be the paranoid old man accusing his own family over a stack of glossy brochures. So I kept smiling, kept thanking them for looking out for me, while some part of me, the part that had spent 41 years reading liars across a service counter, started listening a lot more carefully. It happened on a Thursday in April. I'd gone out to the garage looking for an old socket wrench when I heard Kevin's voice through the door I'd left cracked open. Low, fast, certain nobody was listening. The doctor already said his memory's declining. That's on record now. Once we get him into Golden Meadows, the paperwork practically signs itself. We're not talking about kicking him out, we're talking about him needing care he can't get living alone with us working full-time. I stood frozen, wrench in hand, heart pounding loud enough I was sure he'd hear it through the wall. Patricia already ran the numbers. Market's the way it is, we're looking at right around $890 for the house. Maybe more if we list before fall. That covers his care for years and leaves plenty left over for us. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. He has to go. It's not personal, Denise. It's just what makes sense for everybody. He has to go. I stood there for what felt like an hour but was probably 2 minutes. I set the wrench down as quietly as I'd picked it up, walked back through the yard, and sat on the porch steps in the April sun like nothing in my entire world had just changed. Everything had. My first instinct was to walk into that kitchen and ask my son exactly what kind of man talks about his own father like a car that failed inspection. I didn't. 41 years running a business teaches you something more valuable than fixing transmissions. It teaches you to keep your face calm while someone lies to you, so you can find out exactly what they're planning before you say a word. That night I ate Denise's pot roast and asked Kevin how work was going. Same as always. I didn't sleep, not 1 minute. I lay in the dark replaying every polite comment about those brochures, every sudden doctor's appointment, every question about my savings. It all lined up now, a puzzle I'd been too trusting to see the shape of. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, in the house I'd owned since 1991, the house where I'd raised the son who now wanted me gone, I made a decision. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to find out exactly where I stood, legally, quietly, before they got the chance to move against me. The following Monday, I told Kevin I had a doctor's appointment and drove myself across town in my old Ford F-150. Instead of the doctor, I went to see a lawyer named Grace Whitman, above a bakery on Colfax. I laid it all out, the phone call, the brochures, the questions about my money. She pulled up the county records right there on her screen. Mr. Sullivan, this house is deeded solely in your name. No one else is on the title. Unless you've signed a power of attorney or something similar, nobody can sell this house, admit you anywhere, or touch $1 of your money without your consent. Then she asked the question that made my stomach drop. Has your son asked you to sign anything recently? Insurance forms, medical authorizations, anything like that? I remembered instantly, a stack of papers Kevin had left on the kitchen table 2 weeks earlier, calling them updated insurance documents. I hadn't gotten around to signing them. When I brought them in, Grace confirmed what we both already suspected. They weren't insurance forms. They were a durable power of attorney, handing Kevin full control over my finances, my healthcare, and my home. I never signed it. But finding it changed something in me. I wasn't just an old man being talked about behind his back anymore. I was a man whose own son had tried to trick him into signing away his life over a stack of papers labeled to look boring. Grace recommended a realtor she trusted, a sharp young woman named Carla Nguyen, no connection to anyone Denise knew. I met Carla at a coffee shop 2 miles from the house, paid cash for both coffees, and told her I wanted to sell without my son or his wife knowing anything about it until it was done. She didn't ask why. She just nodded, like she'd heard versions of this story before, and told me a house like mine could bring close to $900,000 if we moved fast. I opened a new account at a credit union Kevin didn't know existed. I redirected my mail to a P.O. box. Every Thursday, while Kevin and Denise thought I was at physical therapy, I met Carla to sign paperwork. For the first time in months, I felt like I was holding the cards again. To keep them relaxed, I let them take me on a tour of Golden Meadows. I walked the hallways, nodded at the activities calendar, told the coordinator the dining room looked lovely, all while having no intention of ever living there. Kevin looked so pleased afterward, telling Denise on speakerphone that Dad seemed really open to it. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Carla listed the house privately, off the big websites, marketed quietly through her own network. Within 9 days we had 3 offers. The best came from a young couple, Mark and Priya Anderson, expecting their first child, who fell in love with the backyard where Kevin used to play catch with me 40 years earlier. All cash. $890,000. No contingencies. I signed that agreement with a hand steadier than I expected, thinking about my son's voice in that garage saying it like it was the easiest decision in the world. Well, Kevin. Somebody does have to go. Turns out it isn't going to be me. 2 weeks later, Kevin came home glowing. His company was sending him and Denise to a conference in Chicago, 8 days, all expenses paid. Perfect timing, Dad, he told me over dinner, not realizing exactly how right he was. While we're gone, think more about Golden Meadows. Maybe even put down a deposit. I told him I'd think about it. Inside, I was already doing the math. Closing could happen in as little as 12 days once both sides signed off, and the Andersons were ready to move the second I gave the word. They left for the airport on a Sunday morning, Denise reminding me 3 times to water her orchids. I waved from the porch as Kevin's car turned the corner and disappeared. Then I called Carla and told her one simple thing: move the closing date up. Let's do it this week, while they're gone, before they ever get the chance to stop what's already in motion. The closing happened that Wednesday, 4 days into their trip, in a small conference room downtown. Mark and Priya sat across from me, Priya's hand resting on her belly, both of them bouncing with excitement about raising their daughter in that backyard. I signed page after page, feeling lighter with every signature. Carla handed me a check for $890,000, minus fees, more money than I'd ever seen in one place in my life. I'd already found my own place, quietly, weeks in advance, a bright independent living condo in Golden, Colorado, mountain views out every window, a woodworking shop in the basement. Nobody chose it for me off a brochure. I chose it myself, walked it myself, signed the lease myself. I spent that Wednesday and Thursday packing 40 years of my life with 2 movers I'd hired in advance, Margaret's china, my father's old workbench, photographs off the walls. Everything that mattered. By Thursday evening, the house on Willow Creek Lane belonged to Mark and Priya Anderson. The locks were changed. I sat in my new living room in Golden, watching the sun go down behind the mountains, feeling more peace than I had in over a year. Before I left for the last time, I sat at the kitchen table where Margaret and I had eaten breakfast for 39 years, and I wrote one final letter. Not to be cruel. Just to be honest. I taped it to the front door, right where I knew Kevin's key would fail to turn. I told him I knew everything, that I'd been standing in that garage in April, that I'd heard him say I had to go, that I knew about the power of attorney disguised as insurance forms. I told him the house had been sold, fair and legal, to a young family who deserved it far more than 2 people who'd spent a year planning how to put their own father away. I told him I wasn't angry, not really, just disappointed, in a way that runs deeper than anger ever could. I signed it the way I'd signed every card since he was 7 years old. Love, Dad. Then I locked the door for the last time and drove away without looking back once. Kevin told me weeks later what happened. He and Denise pulled into the driveway that Sunday evening, still tan from the trip, Denise already talking about her orchids. Kevin walked up with his key, same as 10,000 times before. It wouldn't turn. He jiggled it, tried again, called out that something was wrong with the lock. That's when Priya Anderson opened the door from the inside, confused, holding her newborn daughter, asking who exactly he was and why he was trying to get into her house. My neighbor Harold watched it all unfold from his porch. He said Kevin stood frozen on the steps before noticing the envelope taped beside the doorframe. Denise read it first, standing on the lawn in the fading light, her hands shaking halfway through. Kevin grabbed it from her, read the rest himself. That's when the screaming started, loud enough that 3 neighbors came out to see what was happening. Harold said Denise dropped to her knees on the grass. Kevin just stood there, holding a letter, staring at a house that no longer had a single thing in it that belonged to him. My phone started ringing 4 minutes later. I didn't answer, not that night. Kevin called 31 times over the next 3 days. I let everyone go to voicemail, not out of cruelty, but because I wanted him to sit with exactly the feeling he'd been so ready to hand me. On the 4th day, sitting on my new balcony with the mountains turning orange, I finally picked up. His voice cracked the second I said hello. Dad, please. We didn't mean it like that. We can fix this. Just tell us where you are. I let him talk. Apologies, excuses, stress, money, things getting away from them. When he finally stopped, I told him the truth as plainly as I could. That I'd heard every word of that call in April. That I knew about the power of attorney, and about Golden Meadows, and about $890,000, 4 months before I ever said a word. I told him I wasn't going to yell, because he was still my son and I still loved him, but that love didn't mean I owed him a house I'd worked 41 years to pay off. Especially not after he'd decided, all on his own, that I had to go. I told him I was happy, genuinely happy, in a place I'd chosen myself, surrounded by people who respected me instead of planning around me. Before I hung up, I told him the door wasn't closed forever. It would only open again when he was ready to see me as his father, and not as $890,000 standing in his way. I set the phone down beside my coffee and looked out at those mountains one more time, feeling, for the first time in longer than I could remember, completely and finally at peace. If you made it to the end of this one, you already know exactly what it feels like when a quiet man finally stops being quiet.